You spend somewhere between 3 and 10 hours a week sitting in traffic or riding a train, and almost all of it is wasted English-wise. By the end of this episode, you will know exactly how to turn every single one of those minutes into a fluency drill that most learners never even discover. Okay, so I want you to do some quick math with me before we even say hello.
That's an aggressive way to start an episode.
I know, but stay with me. How long is your commute? Just roughly.
Honestly, it's about 35 minutes each way, so 70 minutes a day?
70 minutes a day, 5 days a week. That's almost 6 hours a week. Over a year, that is around 300 hours.
Okay, when you say it like that, it sounds terrifying.
It should. 300 hours a year where your brain is basically idle. You're not in a meeting, you're not writing an email, you're just there, driving or staring at a train window.
And for most people, that's just dead time. Podcasts about celebrity gossip or nothing at all.
Right, but here's the thing we're going to get into today. That dead time is actually one of the most valuable, underused windows for language learning that exists, and almost nobody uses it correctly.
Because most people think practicing English on my commute means putting on a random English podcast and letting it wash over them.
Which, as we've talked about before, does basically nothing for your actual speaking ability.
Passive listening with your brain half asleep. It feels productive, it is not productive.
So today, we're not talking about background noise. We're talking about a specific method, a specific way to structure your commute so that it becomes actual, measurable practice, not vibes, not exposure, practice.
I like that you're already fired up about this one.
I'm fired up because I actually built this system by accident for French, and it changed everything for me.
Okay, tell that story, because I think that's where we should start.
So about 8 months into learning French, I hit this wall. Classic intermediate plateau. I could read pretty well, I understood a lot when people spoke slowly, but the second I needed to actually produce French, in real time, in conversation, my brain just froze.
That gap between understanding and speaking.
Exactly. And I was frustrated because I was doing everything right. I had my apps, I had my flashcards, I watched French shows with subtitles, but none of it was closing that gap.
So what happened?
Well, at the time, I had this brutal 40-minute drive to work. And one day, I was just sitting in traffic, completely stuck. And out of boredom, I started narrating what I saw, out loud, in French.
Like, there is a red car kind of thing?
Basically, yeah. The light is red. That man is walking his dog. I am going to be late. Just describing my reality, badly, in French, out loud, to nobody.
That's kind of embarrassing if someone saw you.
Extremely embarrassing. But here's what happened over the next few weeks. I started noticing something. When I didn't know a word, like windshield wiper, I'd feel this itch, this little gap. And I'd either guess or I'd remember to look it up later.
So you were generating your own vocabulary needs in real time.
Exactly. And that's different from a textbook handing you a vocabulary list. The textbook gives you words you might need someday. My drive was giving me words I needed right now to describe my actual life.
That's such an important distinction. Relevance changes everything about how well something sticks.
It changed everything for my speaking. Within about 6 weeks, that freeze-up feeling, that panic when I needed to produce French, it was almost gone. Not because I knew more grammar, I didn't study any more grammar during that period, it was because I had forced my mouth and my brain to work together, under time pressure, every single day.
Okay, I have a similar story actually from Spanish, but it's almost the opposite entry point.
Let's hear it.
So for me, it wasn't the driving itself. It was the walk from the train station to my office, about 12 minutes. And I used to spend that time just checking my phone, emails, whatever.
Very normal.
Very normal, very wasted. And then I read something about shadowing, where you listen to native audio and repeat it almost simultaneously. And I thought, well, I have 12 minutes where nobody's around. Let me just try this while I walk.
How did that feel at first?
Awful. Genuinely awful. I felt like my mouth couldn't keep up. I was tripping over words. I sounded nothing like the recording.
That sounds like a normal first day of anything difficult.
Right. But by about the second week, something clicked. My mouth started to physically remember certain patterns, not just vocabulary, but rhythm, intonation, the music of Spanish. And that's something you genuinely cannot get from a textbook or even from reading.
So you had a listening-based drill, I had a speaking-based drill, and we both got results from a commute.
Which tells you it's not really about which specific drill you pick. It's about what the commute gives you that other study time doesn't.
Which is what?
Consistency, low pressure, and forced output, or forced attention depending on the drill. No one's grading you, no one's watching, but you can't exactly scroll your phone if you're driving.
Built-in focus.
Built-in focus, and that's rare. Most of us can't manufacture that kind of distraction-free time on purpose.
Okay, so let's get into why this actually works, because I don't want people to think this is just a cute personal story.
No, there's real research behind basically every piece of what we just described.
Let's start with the noticing piece, since that's what happened to me with my French drive. There's a researcher named Richard Schmidt, and his noticing hypothesis is essentially this. You cannot acquire a piece of language unless you consciously notice it first.
So just hearing something isn't enough.
Not even close. You could listen to 1,000 hours of French radio, and if you never consciously notice a specific structure or word, it can pass right through you without sticking.
Which explains why passive background podcasts don't move the needle much on their own.
Exactly. But when I was narrating my drive and hit a gap, like not knowing windshield wiper, that gap forced noticing. My brain flagged it, I don't have this, I need this. That flag is what makes the eventual learning stick.
It's almost like the commute created a demand, and demand creates attention.
Well put. Now let's talk about your shadowing example, because that connects to a different researcher, Alan Baddeley, and his working memory model.
Oh, I love this one.
So Baddeley's model describes working memory as having limited capacity, especially something called the phonological loop, which is basically the part of your brain that holds and rehearses sounds for a few seconds.
Which is exactly what shadowing trains.
Precisely. When you shadow, you're forcing that phonological loop to work faster than normal, holding a sound pattern just long enough to reproduce it almost instantly. Over time, that loop gets more efficient, faster processing, better retention of sound patterns.
Which is why my Spanish rhythm improved so quickly. I was training a very specific mental muscle, repeatedly in short bursts.
Right, and short bursts matter here too. There's a psychologist, Robert Bjork, who talks about something called desirable difficulty. Learning that feels a little effortful, a little uncomfortable, actually produces stronger, longer-lasting memories than learning that feels smooth and easy.
Which explains why shadowing felt awful for me at first. If it had felt easy, it probably wouldn't have been doing much.
That discomfort is a feature, not a bug. Your brain works harder to encode something it had to struggle for.
And I think there's a spacing element too, right? Because a daily 12-minute walk isn't one big cram session, it's small doses every single day.
Bjork's research also covers spaced repetition, and a commute is basically a built-in spacing mechanism. You're not trying to do 2 hours of intense study once a week. You're getting small, repeated exposures at the same time in the same context every day.
Context is actually a big deal too. There's research on context-dependent memory, the idea that we recall information better when we're in a similar environment to where we learned it.
So if you practice in your car, driving becomes a trigger. Just getting in the car starts activating that English or French or Spanish mode in your brain.
It becomes almost automatic, which is the opposite of sitting down at a desk and forcing yourself to study, which so many people dread.
And let's not forget the foundational piece underneath all of this, which is Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis. Krashen argued we acquire language most effectively when we receive input that's slightly above our current level, what he called I+1, in a low-anxiety environment.
And a commute is about as low stakes as it gets. No one's evaluating you.
No test, no teacher, no red pen. Just you doing your best in private.
So, to summarize the science, noticing creates the hook that makes vocabulary stick, working memory training through shadowing builds sound and rhythm, desirable difficulty and spaced repetition make it durable, context turns your commute into an automatic trigger, and low anxiety input lets your brain actually absorb what it's hearing instead of freezing up.
Which is a lot of research pointing at the same conclusion. Your commute isn't wasted time. It's actually one of the best possible environments for language practice, if you use it correctly.
Which brings us to the part everyone's been waiting for. How do you actually structure this?
So we've built something we call the Waypoint Method. And the idea is simple. Instead of treating your commute as one long block of time, you break it into waypoints, specific checkpoints, and each waypoint gets a different type of drill.
Because different parts of your brain get tired at different times, and different drills demand different levels of energy.
Exactly. So let's walk through it. Waypoint 1 is the first third of your commute, and this is your narration waypoint.
This is basically what you did in the car with French.
Right. You describe your environment out loud, or silently if you're on a train and don't want to look strange. The traffic is heavy today. That building is new. I am thinking about my meeting. Simple sentences, present tense, describing what's real and in front of you.
And the goal here isn't perfection, it's fluency of production, getting your mouth or your inner voice moving in English without stopping to look things up.
If you don't know a word, you just say it in your first language and keep going, or you describe around it. The thing you use to clean the window when it rains. You keep the sentence flowing.
Waypoint 2, the middle third, is the shadowing waypoint, which is where my Spanish story lives.
This is where you play a short audio clip, ideally something at your level or slightly above, and you repeat it almost simultaneously, mimicking rhythm, stress, and pronunciation, not just the words.
Key point here, keep the clips short. 15 to 30 seconds, looped several times, rather than one long clip you only hear once. You want repetition on the same material so you can actually refine it.
And don't worry about understanding every single word during this waypoint. The goal is muscle memory for sound, not comprehension. You can check meaning later.
Waypoint 3, the final third, is the recall waypoint. And this is a little different because it's lower energy, which makes sense since you're probably close to your destination and mentally shifting gears.
During this stretch, you mentally review or say out loud 3 things. 1, a new word or phrase you noticed today. 2, one sentence using it in context. 3, one thing you struggled to say and want to look up later.
So you're closing the loop. You opened gaps in Waypoint 1, trained sound in Waypoint 2, and now you're locking in what actually mattered.
And that third item, the thing you struggled to say, that becomes your homework. That's the one thing you actually look up when you get to your desk or your phone.
Which keeps your active study time incredibly short and targeted. You're not randomly reviewing a giant vocabulary list. You're reviewing exactly what your brain flagged as missing today.
So, to recap the Waypoint Method, first third, narration. Describe your world out loud. Middle third, shadowing. Mimic short native audio clips on a loop. Final third, recall. Mentally summarize one new item, one example sentence, and one gap to fill in later.
And the beautiful part is this scales to any commute length. If you only have 10 minutes, you might just do a shortened version of narration and recall. If you have an hour, you get a much longer shadowing block in the middle.
It's flexible by design because the goal isn't a rigid schedule, it's a repeatable structure you can trust every single day.
And that repeatability is honestly the secret weapon, because the biggest problem most learners have isn't a bad method, it's inconsistency. This ties your practice to something you're already doing every day, so there's nothing extra to remember.
No new habit to build, just a new way of using time you already have.
All right, before we wrap up, let's review a few key words and phrases from today's episode, since that's how you actually lock this stuff in.
First one, commute. That's the regular journey you make to and from work or school. My commute is 30 minutes by train.
Next, plateau. Use the way I used it earlier to describe a point where progress seems to stop. I hit a plateau after a few months of studying.
Windshield wiper, the part of a car that cleans the window when it rains. Small vocabulary, but exactly the kind of word this method helps you learn.
Next, shadowing, the technique where you repeat audio almost at the same time as you hear it, copying rhythm and pronunciation, not just words.
To flag, as in your brain flags a gap. It means to notice or mark something as important or missing.
And finally, to close the loop, which means to finish or complete something you started earlier. The recall waypoint helps you close the loop on what you noticed.
Great vocabulary to walk away with today.
So here's your challenge if you're listening to this on your own commute right now. Tomorrow, try just one waypoint. Pick narration if you're driving, pick shadowing if you're walking or on transit, and just see how it feels.
You don't need to build the whole system on day one. Start with one waypoint, get comfortable, then layer in the rest.
That dead time you complained about at the start of this episode, 300 hours a year, that's not wasted time anymore. That's practice time, if you choose to use it that way.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.